The Hanging Woman, a story of redemption, survival, and second chances. The New Mexico Badlands didn't offer forgiveness. Just heat, dust, and the slow certainty that whatever brought you here would probably kill you. Thomas Blackwood smelled her before he saw her. Blood, old blood, mixed with the sweet rot stink of infection and sun-baked flesh. He'd smelled it before during the war, in field hospitals where surgeons worked without anesthetic, and men screamed themselves hoarse. But the war had been over for 15 years. He pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of an abandoned homestead, weathered fence posts, collapsed barn, a house with no door. And in the yard, hanging from a crossbeam, like a side of beef, left too long in the sun, was a woman. She wasn't dead. Not yet. Thomas could see her chest move in shallow, desperate breaths that spoke of someone clinging to life by sheer stubborn will. She was Apache, tall, nearly 6 feet, even hanging there with powerful shoulders and arms that had clearly known hard work. Her dress was torn, exposing wounds that made Thomas's stomach turn. Whip marks, burn scars, rope burns at her wrists and ankles that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd been bound. Her eyes opened, fever bright, tracking him with the wariness of a wounded animal. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please. I want to be whole again. Save me." Thomas was 62 years old. He'd been a U.S. Marshal once, back when he still believed the law was about justice, instead of just maintaining order for the people who could afford lawyers. He'd quit 15 years ago after being ordered to evict a Cherokee family from land they'd held for generations. He'd done it, followed orders, enforced the law, watched a grandmother weep as soldiers burned her home. That night, he'd turned in his badge and ridden away from everything he'd been. Since then, Thomas had lived by one simple rule: don't get involved. Other people's problems stayed other people's problems. You helped, you got hurt, you intervened, you paid for it. But looking at this woman hung up like a warning sign, left to die in the sun, Thomas felt something crack in the armor he'd built around his conscience. "God damn it," he muttered. Dismounting, he pulled his knife and cut the rope in one swift motion. The woman collapsed into his arms, dead weight, burning with fever. She was heavy, solid muscle, not the delicate damsel from dime novels. Thomas carried her to his horse and draped her across the saddle. As he did, he noticed fresh cigarette ash on the ground. Boot prints. Someone had been here recently, watching, waiting. This wasn't random cruelty. This was deliberate, calculated, and whoever had done this would be coming back. Thomas swung into the saddle, behind the unconscious woman, and spurred his horse forward. He'd broken his one rule, and now, he suspected, he'd pay for it with everything he had left. Thomas's cabin was 15 miles from the abandoned homestead, a day's ride in good conditions. Half that when you were carrying a dying woman. He made it in 4 hours, pushing his horse harder than he should have, feeling the woman's fever burn through his shirt like she was on fire from the inside. Inside the cabin, he laid her on his bed, the only bed, and began cutting away her ruined dress to assess the damage. It was worse than he'd thought. The whip marks were infected, oozing pus. Burns marked her inner thighs, deliberate torture, designed to humiliate as much as hurt. And her wrists bore rope burns so deep he could see exposed tendon. Someone had tortured this woman systematically, professionally. This wasn't rage. This was punishment. Thomas cleaned the wounds with whiskey, she screamed. Even unconscious, and bandaged them with strips torn from his own shirts. He mixed salt into water and spooned it between her cracked lips, forcing her to swallow. For 3 days, she burned with fever, drifting in and out of consciousness, mumbling in Apache and broken English. Most of it was incoherent, but certain phrases repeated. "I didn't steal, I ran. I just ran," he said. "I belonged to him. Papers, he had papers. Please don't look at me like that, please." Thomas didn't ask questions, just changed bandages, forced water down her throat, and waited to see if she'd live or die. On the 4th morning, he woke to find her sitting up in bed, watching him with clear, alert eyes. "You're alive," Thomas said, setting down the coffee he'd been about to drink. Unfortunately, her voice was rough, damaged. Who are you? Thomas Blackwood. This is my cabin. You were dying. I brought you here. Why? Seemed like the thing to do. She studied him for a long moment. What do you want from me? Nothing. When you're strong enough to travel, you can go wherever you want. And if I have nowhere to go, then you can stay until you figure it out. Another long silence. Then, my name is Ayana. It means eternal blossom. Though I haven't felt much like a blossom in a long time. Good name. Thomas poured her water. Can you tell me what happened? Who did this to you? Ayana's jaw tightened. A man named Carson Price. White man, claims to be a labor contractor. Buys and sells native people as indentured servants. Has papers from the territorial government saying it's legal. Thomas felt cold settle in his chest. He'd heard of men like Price, exploiting legal loopholes, using debt bondage to enslave people under the pretense of lawful contracts. He bought you. He claims my tribe sold me to cover debts. I don't know if that's true. My parents are dead, my brother disappeared, but Price had papers. And in this territory, papers matter more than people. What did he do to you? Ayana looked down at her bandaged wrists. He hung me in that yard as advertisement. Men would come, pay to use me, then leave. Price would collect the money and laugh about how profitable I was. Thomas's hands clenched. How long? 6 months. Maybe more. I lost count. She met his eyes. I tried to escape 3 times. This was my 4th attempt. He caught me, beat me, and hung me there to die as a lesson to his other workers. Other workers? There are more. 5, when I left, maybe more now. He keeps them in a warehouse outside Silver City. Guards, chains, the whole operation. Thomas stood, walked to the window, looked out at the empty desert. He'd spent 15 years running from the law, from responsibility, from the weight of caring about injustice. And here it was again, demanding he choose, walk away or stand up. You should rest, he said finally. We'll talk more when you're stronger. Ayana nodded, lay back down. But before she closed her eyes, she said, Thank you. For not treating me like property. Thomas didn't respond. Just watched the desert and wondered if the two was too old to start caring again. They came on the 6th day. Thomas spotted the dust cloud from a mile out. 3 riders. Moving deliberately, tracking. He'd known they'd come. Men like Carson Price didn't lose property without coming to reclaim it. Ayana, he called into the cabin. We've got company. She appeared in the doorway, still weak, but able to stand. She saw the riders, and her face went pale. It's them, Price and his men. Get inside. Stay out of sight. They'll burn the cabin if you don't hand me over. Then they'll burn it. I'm not handing you over. Why? You don't even know me. Why risk everything? Thomas checked his rifle, a Winchester he'd carried since the war. Because I'm tired of being the kind of man who lets bad things happen just to keep himself safe. The riders stopped at the property line. Price was in the center, a man in his 40s, well-dressed, with the kind of face that looked respectable until you saw the eyes. Cold, empty, calculating. Thomas Blackwood. Price called out. We're here for stolen property. A woman named E. Return her immediately, and we'll leave peacefully. She's not property, Thomas shouted back. She's a person. And she's under my protection. She's under contract. I have legal documents. Legal doesn't mean right. Now turn around and leave my land. Price smiled a snake smile. Or what? 1 old man, against 3 armed professionals. Those are poor odds, Mr. Blackwood. Maybe. But you'll be the first to die, guaranteed. Still want to test it? The smile faltered. Price glanced at his men, hired guns, not martyrs. They shifted nervously in their saddles. This isn't over, Price said finally. I'll be back with the law. With papers. With authorization, and when I return, you'll hang right beside her for harboring fugitive property. They rode away, but Thomas knew it was just the first round. Inside the cabin, Ayana was trembling. He'll come back. With more men. With legal authority. You can't fight that. Maybe not. But I can try. I'm nobody. I have nothing. I can't pay you, can't help you. Why are you doing this? Thomas sat down heavily. 15 years ago, I was a marshal. I had a badge authority, the law behind me. And I used all of it to do terrible things to good people because the law said it was right. He looked at his hands. I quit because I couldn't look at myself anymore, couldn't stand being the man who chose the law over what was right. And now? Now I'm choosing different. Maybe it's too late to fix what I broke, but at least I can try not to break anything else. Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked over, placed her hand on his shoulder, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him. Thank you, she said, for seeing me as a person instead of a problem. Thomas nodded. Rest, we've got planning to do, because Price will be back, and next time he'll bring everything he's got. Price returned 5 days later with 10 men and a territorial marshal named Carberman Thomas recognized from his own marshal days. A man who'd always been more interested in who paid him than who was right. They surrounded the cabin at dawn, giving Thomas no chance to run. Thomas Blackwood, Cobb shouted. Come out. You're under arrest for harboring fugitive property and interfering with lawful contracts. Thomas stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but not raised. Cobb, still selling yourself to the highest bidder, I see. Still thinking you're better than the law, Blackwood. Not better than the law, just better than your version of it. Ayanna appeared beside Thomas, and Price's eyes lit up with greedy triumph. There she is. Arrest her. She's mine by legal contract. Show me the contract, Thomas said. Price produced papers official looking, with territorial seals. Purchased from the Mescalero Apache Tribal Council. $500. Legal and binding. And did Ayanna sign this? She doesn't need to sign. Her tribe sold her labor. That's how it works. Thomas turned to Cobb. So, we're allowing slavery now. Thought we fought a war about that. It's not slavery, Cobb said, looking uncomfortable. It's indentured servitude. Perfectly legal in this territory. Legal. Thomas spat the word. You know what else was legal? Hanging witches, owning human beings, massacring villagers because they were inconvenient. He raised his rifle slightly. I don't care about your papers, Cobb. She stays with me. Then you'll die with her. We've got you surrounded. 10 guns against 1. Surrender now, and you'll get a trial. I had a trial 15 years ago. It was called My Conscience, and I lost. Thomas looked at his former colleague. But I'm not losing this time. Before anyone could react, a new voice cut across the yard. Nobody's losing anything, except maybe Mr. Price. Everyone turned. A man was approaching on horseback, Holder native, wearing the ceremonial dress of a Mescalero Apache elder. My name is Greyhawk, the man announced, and I am chief of the Mescalero Apache Council. Price paled. What are you doing here? I received a very interesting telegram from Thomas Blackwood, asking about a contract supposedly signed by my council to sell a woman named Ihna. Greyhawk pulled out papers of his own. I reviewed our records. No such contract exists. This, he gestured at Price's documents, is forgery. That's impossible. I have seals, signatures, forged seals. Forged signatures? Greyhawk's voice was iron. You have been running an illegal slavery operation under the guise of legal contracts, and now, in front of a U.S. Marshal and multiple witnesses, you have been exposed. Cobb looked at the papers, then at Price. Is this true? I was told these were legitimate. My associate handled the paperwork. Then your associate is a forger, and you're under arrest. Cobb actually looked relieved, probably grateful he didn't have to enforce unjust law this time. Mr. Price, you're coming with me, and we'll be investigating your warehouse near Silver City. As Price was led away in handcuffs, screaming about lawyers and connections, Greyhawk approached Ayanna. I am sorry, he said in Apache, which Thomas didn't understand but could feel the weight of. Your brother came to me 3 months ago. Said you'd been taken. We've been searching ever since. Ayana's eyes filled with tears. My brother is alive. Alive and waiting for you. Whenever you're ready to come home. She looked at Thomas, then back at Greyhawk. Can I have some time? All the time you need. After the riders left taking Price to justice and promising to free the other captives, Thomas and Ayana stood on the porch in silence. You could go, Thomas said. Back to your people. Your brother. I could, Ayana agreed. Or, I could stay here, help build something. With someone who sees me as a person, this place isn't much. Neither am I will match. Thomas smiled a real smile, the first in 15 years. All right then. Let's build something. Epilogue. What they built 2 years later, the cabin had grown. New rooms. A barn. Fences that actually stood straight. And in the garden behind the house, vegetables growing in neat roseproof that even desert land could bloom. If you gave it enough care. Yana worked the garden while Thomas mended tack. They developed a rhythm complementary work, shared meals. Comfortable silences. Her brother visited monthly, bringing news from the reservation. Greyhawk had used Price's arrest to push for legal reforms, actual oversight of labor contracts. Penalties for fraud. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, Ayana asked, Do you regret it? Giving up your quiet life to save one woman? Thomas thought about it. Really thought? I spent 15 years regretting the things I didn't do. The people I didn't help. The injustices I ignored because it was easier. He looked at the home they'd built together. This I don't regret. Not for a second. Even though we'll never be rich. Never be comfortable. I've got a roof, food, and someone who sees me as I am, instead of who I was. That's richer than most people ever get. Ayana smiled. You're a good man, Thomas Blackwood. I'm a man trying to be good. There's a difference. They sat together as darkness fell, to people who'd been broken by the world and somehow found wholeness in each other's company. Not romance. Neither needed that complication. Just partnership, respect. The quiet knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are terrible and the cost is high. In the distance, coyotes howled, the desert wind blew warm and steady. And in a small cabin on the edge of nowhere, to people who'd learned the hard way that legal doesn't mean right, and right doesn't always win, but it's always worth fighting for, sat together and watched the stars emerge. Behind them, the cabin stood strong. Ahead of them, whatever came next. And between them, the simple revolutionary truth that had saved them both. Every person deserves to be whole, to choose to be seen as human instead of property, and sometimes, that truth is worth dying for. But it's always worth living for.